By the time we reach the Land of Shadows, the Hornsent have been under the heel of the Golden Order for more years than we can possibly know. We know that Queen Marika sealed away the land that persecuted her people, and sent her son to raze its culture and customs to the ground. But there are still traces of their ancient practices found throughout the land. When we come to the Ballarat Tower settlement, we encounter Hornsent warriors. We experience the ritual dancing of the divine beast. We come face to face with the Hornsent Grand Dam, and we see the architecture of the land the Hornsent used to rule. We encounter the practices of their old world both here and in enir-ilim, which sits above the settlement. But there are other areas where these adherents to the old ways still reside. Today we'll be discussing one of these groups of Hornsent, which seems untouched by time, still carrying out their duties even after the city's burned. The Hornsent Inquisitors. Welcome to Elden Lore, our long-running series diving into the people, places, and factions of the Lands Between and the Land of Shadow. Whether this is your first time finding the channel after Night Reign's beta, or you're a long-time subscriber, welcome. We're happy to have you with us today as we continue unraveling this world. We're always happy to answer any lore questions we find in the comments, so feel free to share yours. And if the answer's big enough, you may even see a video dedicated to it. We also have a Discord where our community talks about all things FromSoft. Lately we've been sharing our thoughts on Night Reign post-network test, so check it out if you're curious. If you end up liking our content, please consider subscribing. But no pressure, because your viewership is always enough for us. With that said, let's dive into the Hornsent Inquisitors, and just what their role was in their society. You're most likely to encounter the Inquisitors of the Land of Shadow for the first time when exploring the Abyssal Woods. But you likely have no frame of reference for who they are, or why they wield candlesticks as weapons. But the more we learn about them, the clearer this becomes. We know that they actually originate from Ballarat, as the incantation Golden Arcs tells us it's a sorcery of the Inquisitors of the Tower, wielded as an incantation of the Spiral. A swing of the arm releases a procession of golden arcs. The arcs resemble barbs, a known symbol of coercive questioning. It makes sense that these enemies would originate from the area, as they're found most prominently in enir-ilim, just above the settlement. While they can be fought elsewhere, I think the area that tells us the most about them is actually Midra's Manse. At the bottom of the Darklight Catacombs, we come across the Elder Inquisitor, Jory, who's defending the exit, or rather, the entrance, to a land burned and destroyed by the Flame of Frenzy. As we fight her, she summons multiple Candle Inquisitors to attack us at her behest, trying to bathe us in flame in order to keep us away. Interestingly, this shows the Inquisitors, who almost definitely held their positions before Messmer's crusade, also utilize flame to punish and torture those who would be considered enemies of the Hornsent. Jory is particularly interesting, as she's referred to as an elder, and is shown to lead the other Inquisitors. The Inquisitor's ashes shed some light on this by telling us the Inquisitor hags wielded barbed candlesticks. One of the Inquisitors casts a tower hex to heal HP, while the hex of the other boosts her own attack power. Inquisitions often perplex the minds of the uninitiated, and so seniority was viewed as an asset. So those outside the Inquisitor's order did not have a strong idea of what exactly it meant to be an Inquisitor, only that the oldest among them had enough knowledge and experience to lead the others. Once we defeat Jory, we earn her weapon, the barbed staff spear, which tells us the tip bristles with golden barbs, symbolic of the Inquisition's torture, allowing one to wield the staff as a great spear. These golden barbs are a symbol of their order, and you could be forgiven for thinking that torture is the main purpose of the Inquisitors. That is until we learn what Jory was hiding, or rather, what she and her compatriots acted as a bulwark against to keep the Land of Shadow from falling. As we explore the Abyssal Woods beyond the catacombs, burned and destroyed by the Flame of Frenzy, we come across multiple small groups of Inquisitors who've lost themselves entirely to the flame. Eyes now blazing yellow, However, their sacrifice seems to serve a greater purpose. When approaching Midra's manse deep within this area, we see beheaded bodies lined up as if to tell us, turn away unless you want to meet the same fate. These bodies are obviously a warning, but the golden light sticking out of their necks serves a purpose. These are barbs that are keeping the flame of frenzy that infected their bodies locked in place, unable to burst forth, slowing the spread. In fact, it's fair to assume that the Great Sword of Damnation stabbed through Midra's head, holding the Lord of Frenzied Flame at bay, was also an instrument used by the Inquisitors, as before it coils back around itself, it too shares the barb symbol of Jory's signature weapon. Outside of their work in keeping the flame at bay, it seems these Candle Inquisitors are also slowly destroying the manse and all of the knowledge within it, in order to keep anyone from unlocking the same knowledge Midra came across. Aside from the Candlestick Inquisitors and Jory, there's one other variation of this enemy found in both Midra's manse and enir-ilim that I haven't quite figured out: the Fat Inquisitors. These are basically enormous Inquisitors, able to cast all of the incantations associated with their order. While these enemies can't move very quickly, they are tougher than they appear and can take a beating. All this to say that the Fat Inquisitors clearly have some level of seniority and have significant power compared to their counterparts. But I don't know why this comes with the additional bulk, especially given that their horn should be enough of a symbol of their strength. Perhaps you could argue that those that sit at the higher echelons of their order grow fat on the luxuries they're afforded with their status, but there's no written lore to imply whether or not this is truly the case. A couple of these enemies will actually drop revered spirit ashes, so I believe that's a strong indication that these particular Inquisitors are a couple of rungs up from your typical Candle Inquisitor, but I'm not certain that they rank above the Elders like Jory. One last thing I wanted to call out about the Inquisitors is their possible tie to the base game of Elden Ring. As they are Hornsent and far removed from the events of our adventure through the Lands Between, you'd think they couldn't possibly have any influence on the Lands of Gold. However, I think Praetor Rykard and his own Inquisitor, Giza, may have taken inspiration from these enemies. The Inquisitor's Girandol is described as an instrument of torture used on nobles behind the curtain at the Volcano Manor of Mount Gelmir. Its numerous spikes pierce the flesh, then singe the wounds with flame. The smell of burnt blood induces despair in the victim, a candlestick conceived by a thorough mind. I've always thought that the mind this was referring to was either Rykard or Giza, but now knowing that the Candle Inquisitors were essentially the most common of their order, I believe this thorough mind was actually repurposing the practices of other people. For Rykard, this would make perfect sense, as we know he often traveled outside the Lands Between due to his relationship with Lady Tanith and the associated lore. Perhaps the Inquisitors of the Volcano Manor were modeled after those of the Hornsent all along. This is all there is to say about the Inquisitors, as they have very little lore associated with them. What we can gather of their background is that it's murky. We don't know why the Hornsent needed Inquisitors to question their enemies, as they didn't seem to have any capable of higher thought, aside from possibly the Giants. Perhaps they were primarily meant to be used against the Shamans, but given their subjugation, I'm not sure this would make much sense. Regardless, we saw what they could do for the land, both the good and the bad, as they defend their home from the spread of frenzy by sacrificing themselves to wander the Abyssal Woods. I'd love to know more about their history and conception in Hornsent society, but unfortunately, it seems like these things will forever be a mystery to those of us combing through the pages of the Land of Shadows, looking for answers. Thank you for joining me as I shared everything I could find on the Inquisitors of the Land of Shadows. Do you believe these Inquisitors predate the Erdtree's rise, or were they conceived after Marika became a god? Is Jory the Elder Inquisitor at the top of their order, or do the Fat Inquisitors outrank her? Did Rykard borrow the practices of the Hornsent in order to fulfill his role as the Golden Order's Praetor? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all, so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.